live stream?
Yeah, we took several calls this week of folks asking, so.
John, are you going anywhere for Thanksgiving? I already asked everybody else.
Yeah.
Thanks.
Good pleasure.
Thank you everybody for being here. Tonight we're coming out to have a town hall on the topic of psilocybin and psilocybin services. The idea of whether or not we want to be hosting those or allowing those types of services in the city of Paloma. And just wanted to hear from the community. The city council is very interested in hearing what the community has to say. We all have our own thoughts and opinions, and really want to hear your thoughts, your questions, the things that your perspectives. Chris, do you want to talk to us about the ordinance that we have and the process and what we're looking for over the next year?
I will, thank you. So again, yeah. So the city council asked me to just go through where we're at right now and some of the ordinances. If you didn't see them or pick them up on the small table here on your way in, I did provide a copy of the 2 ordinances, and then there's an information kind of fact sheet there as well. Feel free to grab one of those. Process-wise, I think I'll hit that first. Well, I'm going to try to summarize here. There's some of the information on the background is provided in the ordinances to give some of that background, but let me just pre-preface it with most recently, the city council has looked at this topic again. The city attorney and myself have pulled together these ordinances. There's 2 separate ordinances. They came before the city council in draft form, and then they came back to the city council, were voted on earlier this month for a first vote. We're having this town hall tonight, and then they'll come back in front of the city council for a second vote next Monday. So this coming Monday. And that'll be the final vote on both of the ordinances. So I thought I'd at least touch on both of the ordinances now. And again, just repeat, the city council is very interested to hear from members of the community about the topic. And I'll just kind of summarize these briefly. Again, we want the majority of this time to be for you to go through it, but let me just talk through the kind of high points. I'm going to start on ordinance number 887. The preliminary causes, again, just kind of give some of the background. I won't read through all of that. I'll leave that to you to read through. The next section really is definitions. So it lays out several specific new definitions that aren't currently found within the Philomath Municipal Code. When we get to 93020 on page 2, it talks about the requirement for a business license that's going to be required. The city of Philomath doesn't currently do business licenses for any businesses. We're looking to change that to require a business license for all businesses when they first come to the city. Our recommendation to the city council is to not do an annual renewal, but just a one-time license registration. Or excuse me, a license registration for new businesses when they first come to Philomath, so that we can know what type of business they're doing. We can double check their zoning. We can get contact information if there's an emergency and the police needs to get a hold of somebody, just so we can get some basic information about who the owner is and what's going on there. And so we would include the requirement for that business license for somebody who's opening up a psilocybin manufacturing center or a service center. State law, I won't get into a lot. State law differentiates between just those 2. It's either a manufacturing center or it's going to be a service center where they're actually prescribing or giving the medication and overseeing it and then releasing the individual to an adult. And there's, I probably should have prefaced that, there's a lot of state rules about what's required with these facilities. And so the city's role here is not to prescribe all of the rules that are going to pertain to these centers or the manufacturing centers. State law does most of that, but state law also recognizes that there may be specific issues where cities want to put additional time, place, or manner restrictions on service centers or manufacturing locations of the psilocybin because it's still a Schedule One drug on the federal list. So with that, what this first ordinance is doing, 887, is establishing these time, place, and manner regulations on psilocybin manufacturing centers and service centers. So we're adding new language into Philomath's code to kind of complement what the state code kind of left out or left up to cities to have a little bit of control over. So we're not writing all the rules that are going to mandate the use and or business dealings of psilocybin, but the city-specific ones is what we're going to focus in on. So all that said, again, business licenses will be covered. I'm going to drop down a little bit. It talks through waivers. If you're going to have one of these businesses, the city's waiving on any of our liability just because we license you to have the business doesn't mean that we're insuring it or guaranteeing it or anything like that. So there's a kind of a liability waiver and indemnification as well that will be protected. A criminal background check is going to be required for that business license. That's going to be mandated by the state, but the police chief here is going to review it as well. There's some standards of operations that are there. I want to hit on those because here's where we get a little bit more specific. Besides registering and being compliant with Oregon Health Authority, which is what's overseeing these facilities, complying with all other laws, the city of Philomath is looking to set specific hours of operation. So the line here, this is letter C on 93080, is hours of operation, normal operating hours. Your service centers and manufacturing sites must be no earlier than 8 a.m. and no later than 10 p.m. on the same day. So 8 in the morning to 10 at night is normal operating hours. No public view into the facilities. You have to have like shaded glass, no flashing lights and things inside to lure people in, right? So a little bit of the public view taken into account. Air filtration and ventilation systems have to be installed. That's primarily towards the manufacturing sites, so no odors become nuisances. Lighting has to be in place for outdoor. The use has to be limited to on-site in the facilities. No outdoor storage. That's similar to most of our commercial businesses. You can't store equipment outdoors. You can't qualify as a home occupation for psilocybin center or manufacturing. So unlike other businesses that you can do out of your garage or out of an extra room, that would not be allowed here. No drive-throughs or walk-ups in this type of business. And all of the products have to be labeled. That gets us through 93080. 93090 deals specific to location, and I'll talk through these because these tend to be of greatest angst for folks on where they're going to be located. So I'm just going to read through this. This is letter A under 93090 on page 4. A psilocybin service center or manufacturing site shall not locate within a residence or mixed-use property that includes a residence. Number 2, within 1,000 feet of a public elementary or secondary school for which attendance is compulsory under Oregon statute. Number 3, within 1,000 feet of a private or parochial elementary or secondary school teaching children as described in Oregon statute 339. Number 4, within 1,000 feet of any school or care facility that predominantly serves children. And number 5, within 1,000 feet of any public library or public park. So that's location, inhibits there. Service centers, manufacturing sites can only be located in specific zones. The service centers can only be in the general commercial, the C2 zone, just based on the type of business. And for psilocybin manufacturing, that's going to be limited to our industrial sites, either heavy industrial or light industrial. Some comments about distancing and how it's measured. Signage will be allowed similar to other signage for other types of businesses. Nothing real specific there. The city reserves the right to examine the books, records, premises. That's similar to language that we see in the marijuana facilities language. Just by the nature of that, based on the permitting, we're gonna be allowed to look at that. And that's also in compliance with some state rules and laws already in place. They're agreeing that they're gonna be compliant with law enforcement. If we've got reason to believe that there's some shenanigans or anything going on that the police need to be involved in, they'll be required to cooperate with law enforcement. And then we get down to enforcement. Again, I'm glossing over this a little bit because it gets a little detail-y. The part of enforcement, the business license can be on the line if there's non-compliance with any of these issues. Civil penalties can be enforced. Other remedies are kind of put in there, municipal court, circuit court, etc. And then remedies not be excessive. So there's some language there about what if they don't comply. A little section about public nuisance. If at any time they're not compliant, it can be deemed a public nuisance, and the city can take abatement steps to take care of that nuisance if the owner isn't responsive in taking care of it. And then a little bit of section about confidentiality and the city agreeing to not put out confidential information and kind of find what's confidential about ownership, et cetera, et cetera. So, and then just the operative date, if approved by the city council on the second vote this next Monday, these time, place, manner restrictions would come in place at the time that this next ordinance I'm going to talk about, 888, Ordinance 888 is a ban on psilocybin manufacturing and service centers within the city of Philomath. So the way that this reads is all of these time, place, and manner restrictions would be enacted or become, what's the specific language? Immediately become operative. Should the majority of, I'm just going to read it, should the majority of the electors of the city of Philomath reject the psilocybin prohibition set forth in Ordinance 888. So 888 is the ban, and I'll talk about it here briefly. If the ban that goes out to the voters in 2026, I'll talk time term second, is not approved by the electorate, if they say we don't want the ban, then these time, place, manner restrictions would become operative, right? So they're going to start into effect. Until that time, if the ban is voted in favor of by the voters in 2026, then these time, place, manner restrictions are kind of moot, right? Like we don't need time, place, manner restrictions if there's a ban over the whole thing. So these two ordinances are coming to the council at the same time because they really do complement each other, as in they work together with each other. It's helpful if I touch on 888 just real quick, and then we really do want to open it up. I realize I'm taking a lot of time to kind of set the stage here. As I mentioned, Ordinance 888, again, available here on the table if you didn't get it, has, again, a bunch of whereas clauses, kind of giving the background of how we got here. If I can, I'm going to read the last three because I think they're appropriate. The city council took some real time to craft this language. Again, starting from the third from the bottom, whereas the Philomath City Council, no, I'm going to do one better. Councilmember Bourne, can you read those three for me? And I'm going to catch my brother.
So yeah, starting on line 20 of Ordinance 888, whereas the Philomath City Council believes that until the electorate is able to provide direction on a permanent ban, continuing to prohibit psilocybin product manufacturers and psilocybin service centers within the city's jurisdictional boundaries is in the best interest of the city, and whereas the City Council seeks to refer to the voters of Philomath the question of whether to establish a ban on state licensed psilocybin product manufacturers and psilocybin service centers within the city's jurisdictional boundaries at the city's next general election. And whereas Philomath City Council has adopted time, place, and manner restrictions on psilocybin product manufacturing and service centers, which will be enforceable if voters of Philomath vote not to enact the ban on state licensed psilocybin facilities within the city.
Great, thank you. So then, now therefore, City of Philomath ordains as follows. Section 1 is the prohibition, right? The establishment of psilocybin product manufacturers licensed under the Oregon statute and psilocybin service centers licensed under Oregon statute is prohibited in the City of Philomath. So city limits, prohibited. Section 2, referral. The ordinance is referred to the electors of the City of Philomath for approval at the next statewide general election, which is going to be November 3rd, 2026. We could have looked at these ordinances a couple of months ago, or like 6 months ago, and had them on this year's ballot. Several cities did that. We didn't. I lost track of the time and we got too far into it. So talking to the attorney said we can still put the temporary ban in place now. So if this ordinance is passed, it'll put a temporary ban in place and we'll go out to the voters in 2026 and ask what the voters want to do. The ban or to continue the ban or to remove the ban and go to the time, place, manner restrictions. And then section 3, just repeal if majorities of the electorate of the city of Philomath reject the psilocybin prohibition described in section 1, this ordinance shall thereafter be immediately repealed. So, and then some language about severability and everything else. So those are the two that kind of work together. Again, the city council is going to look at both of them. I will report both of them passed. It wasn't unanimous, but both ordinances passed the city council vote at the meeting at the beginning of the month. And so again, they'll be both up on the council agenda for next Monday city council meeting for a second and final vote. And it doesn't have to be unanimous, it's majority, it'll go forward. So come Monday, we'll either have a temporary ban in place and direction to put this in front of the voters of 2026 to continue the ban, or we'll have a rejection of the temporary ban and a rejection of the time, place, manner restrictions. And come January 1 of 2025, psilocybin manufacturing and service centers will be allowed in the city of Philomath. Our current ban that we adopted 2 years ago will expire at the end of this calendar year, which is why we're looking to do either continue the temporary ban or not right now. Hopefully that gives you enough background. Again, we really want this set up to hear from you and ask any questions, so I'll defer the rest of my questions until I'm asked more questions and turn the time back over to you, Mayor Jones.
Thank you. Yeah, so we're here. We're council together, want to really hear. This is a town hall. I want to hear from you all about your perspective, your questions, your thoughts.
Can I say one thing? I think, at least for me, the thing I'm most curious to get feedback on is on the time, place, and manner restrictions, and making sure that those are crafted in a way that the community feels comfortable with. I mean, going off what the city manager said, I think it seems like both of these will pass on Monday. So given that, I think the key is not whether or not they'll pass, it's more what should they say in the version of the time, place, and manner restrictions for if the voters decide they don't want to ban, what do they want instead of a ban? Instead of just sort of a free-for-all, what are the parameters they want the city to have on psilocybin? So I guess for me,
But
that's...
if you have any perspective at all, we want to hear.
Yeah.
That's his perspective, but I want to hear everything. So
The time, place, manner that he read is right over there. It looks like this, so in case you wanted to look at it.
Question on that. The requirements for the facility, it could be fairly costly, but that makes sense in what you're trying to protect. The thing that caught my attention is not as much the restrictions from the schools and things like that, but when you said care facility. And I'm wondering if somebody went to the effort to build a facility for a treatment and somebody decides to put an elder care half a block away, what happens?
Yes, we would handle it similar to, that situation can happen with other types of facilities, not just these. It's whoever gets there first, right? So if they're there first, they have permission to be there first, they've got permits to be there. It's an open center next to them. You're not gonna retroactively shut somebody else down. So once they are permitted and allowed, then they're permitted and allowed. Yeah, we wouldn't be retroactive on that.
And just for the record, the care facility is excluded. It says that predominantly serves children. So it wouldn't be an elder care facility, it'd be like a child care.
I mean, I just heard about this a little bit ago. So I was coming to get information because it caught my eye and support of the ban. So this was.
thank you.
Has anyone on the council, has anyone researched how much these treatments cost and at what level they're trying to do it?
Ryan's got information about that.
I have researched that, and depending on the dosage, and I guess 25 milligrams is a standard dosage right now, but you can go lighter or heavier. $800 to $3,000, so it's quite expensive, and that's for one treatment. With that one treatment, you get a counseling session ahead of time, and you can even have a second one of those if you want it. And then you have the administration, which then you stay in the room until it's done.
So with normal people like us, we don't make a whole lot of money. It's really destroying people from outside of our community. It's not affordable for the majority of us who may want to consider it, who have tried other medications. So
I agree with you. It's expensive for the average person to use. In fact, I read something that said the majority of the people coming in are coming in from out of state to use it. So, because this is the only state where it's legal. Until there's a medical component, I don't think there's any insurance that would cover it. If there was something like that, then maybe insurance would cover it, but I don't think it's gonna happen right now, at least.
it really doesn't benefit us as a community if somebody wants to, try something they didn't try in the past, whether it be any other SSRI, Prozac, any of the other medications. It's not a feasible option for any normal person, any regular person that's going to be part of our community. If it was affordable, then yeah, it'd be more favorable.
Except economically, of course.
Right.
I think that was one of my concerns was, if this is a licensed facility and there was a need here and it's regulated, the problem with that, but so many places in Oregon have banned it. It seems like there's going to be some sort of focal point for treatment. And I didn't think about out of state. I was just thinking of Oregon.
No.
I'm not real happy with being the treatment center for Oregon.
Chief, do you have information about where they're located regionally?
Alice right now. Let's open. There were 2 in Albany, and they have since closed. I think the last one closed earlier this month.
Do you know why they closed?
I do. There's not enough customers because they can't afford it. So, yeah.
So it's probably a mute point here, but still, you gotta stick with it.
Any other thoughts?
Question about the time, place, manner. I understand the school bans. I'm less clear on the library and the parks. That seems, why a library? I mean, because children could be there?
Thoughts?
I will again share that in our discussion, we said often children go to the library unsupervised after school. And that was the part. If they were supervised all the time, that wouldn't be an issue necessarily, but because some parents work and the children have nowhere to go, they go to the library after school, and that's why. And same thing with parks that have playgrounds, that's focused more on children than parks that don't have playgrounds would be different.
What's the concern? Exactly.
I can speak to that because, like a patient in a hospital, you cannot be held there against your will. So, if someone in a psilocybin facility should have a bad experience and decide they're leaving, and who knows what they're going to do, I would not want that to happen anywhere where there might be children. Now, around a school, there are always lots of people around. There are lots of people to help you. But if you're in a park, if you're a young mother with young children in a park, there may not be anyone there to help you. So that's the scenario I'm trying to address.
Are those kinds of scenarios, have you read of those being a problem elsewhere?
In conjunction with psilocybins? No, I have not. But one thing I would comment on is that effective in January of next year, Senate Bill 303 goes in, I believe it's 303.
There's a lot of them.
It's a bill that requires the psilocybin facilities to report in aggregate how many people they've treated, their age, their gender, what age for what their experience was, if they had a good trip, if they had a bad trip. I did read one article, I believe, from OPB that was published, I believe, earlier this year, but that described that they've treated thousands of people. And I believe as of the end of this year, they're expected to have treated 7,000 people. And at the time this was written, they had only had 4 who required emergency assistance. That's too many as far as I'm concerned. So, there are negative side effects to nausea, anxiety, are a couple of the side effects. Not everyone experiences those. But I don't believe that's something I would like close to a city.
And it sounds like that's capturing negative experiences in the facility. They're probably perhaps unaware of instances that would be outside of the facility, I would think.
I would think so, that they would.
Yeah.
But I believe the intent of the treatment is that you would have concluded the experience by the time you left. Now, the half-life of psilocybin is 3 hours. Trips, if you will, they might last 6 to 12 hours, who knows? And it's going to vary from person to person and depending on the dosage.
And I'll just mention that, these time, place, manner restrictions are us attempting to identify what are our concerns, how might we address these concerns, and if we're thinking children are one of our concerns, and how do we avoid that situation? So whether or not we have data suggesting that the problem is, this is our approach, this is our effort to address our concerns, and then also now your concerns. So if you think, I'm not worried about people tripping around my kids, then let us know that. But if we think it is, then that's just trying to figure out how to do that.
I'm not worried about people tripping around kids, but I guess I was wondering if there is any kind of data of any children. It seems like there are definitely understandable qualms about psilocybin. People harming children while on it doesn't strike me as one. But if there's data, I don't know, maybe there are instances where that has happened.
Well, there is not a lot of data, and even though this went into effect in 2022, the first center didn't open till June of 2023. It took them a long time to get all the training and all the things in place. So there's not much data. When I was reading about psilocybin, a good trip, they're going to be fine. They're going to go home and be helped and whatever. But the bad trip brings out paranoia and aggression, and that is one of the side effects if they react negatively to it. And I don't know that if they're going to until they've tried it. So with the paranoia and the aggression, that's where it would be a concern for everyone, not just children, but everyone.
Chief, do you have any information about data or episodes? Do you know anything about?
The only thing I know about it is I talked to our regional agencies that have had psilocybin service centers there, and they did not report any calls for service.
Got it. Thank you. Councilor McGuire?
I just wanted to say to that question, not as an answer, but just for context, that line was not in the original version of this ordinance. That's something that we added at our last meeting, so it is also something we could discuss at the next meeting if there are concerns with that. But just for context, yeah.
I think hearing that there isn't much data and that Oregon is the first state to allow this, like, I don't think I feel comfortable having Columbus be the first, community that's like the guinea pig to see what happens if we don't, that makes me feel comfortable.
I'm here mostly out of curiosity. The issue of this community being sort of a guinea pig for a new industry, that makes a lot of sense to me. Especially with issues about, people coming in because this is the only place that offers the treatment. On the other hand, I've suffered from depression and considered depression drugs, and when I was researching depression drugs, the incidences of poor
reaction to.
well, yeah, there's issues around various, what do you call them, SSRIs, right, where people react badly and are violent and aggressive or suicidal. So the medical issues aren't exclusive to psilocybin. And, I haven't eaten mushrooms myself, but I have a lot of young friends and older friends who've used it, and I've heard stories, and I've done a little bit of research, and I think, to me, it sounds like an interesting and potentially very positive alternative to some of the manufactured drugs, and I think it would be a good avenue to explore. And with regard to the cost, my understanding is that unlike, Zoloft or SSRIs, where you're on a prescription for the rest of your life, sometimes what this does is it creates a shift in awareness, consciousness, attitude, emotion, and so it's kind of one and done sometimes. But it's not, because of the nature of the compound and the way it works. I've heard stories from people who say it just completely shifted my perspective and worldview, and I don't see things the way I used to. So, I'm being the first one in attracting all the horde for experimentation, maybe that's not the best way to go, but in general, I think because it was a controlled substance previously, I'm a little concerned about sort of a reaction like, oh my God, it's drugs, it's bad, right? And people have been using it for thousands of years. So that's not a thumbs up or a thumbs down, it's just kind of
Just a thumb.
perspective.
How's the causing?
I appreciate your comments. Actually, I appreciate all of your comments. And I would point out that this does have tremendous potential. And I don't deny that in any way. So not only for depression, but end of life anxiety, numerous issues for which it might be helpful. But I believe the clinical research setting is the best way to test it, and not necessarily in fulfillment. And there's a tremendous need for randomized clinical trials, large trials in which people are given a drug or a placebo, and they don't know which, and then they measure the results. And there have been many clinical trials, but most of them have been on a smaller scale. But there is a lot of literature out there about clinical trials, but that says there's a need for a broader randomized clinical trials. Yes.
I have a question. What
mentioned earlier in terms of the 3-hour time frame and calling it a trip. Is the person in their right mind? And I don't know a lot about what it actually does, but would you be able to interact with a person that's on the trip?
I'm not an expert on it, but since they do work with a facilitator for the entire period of the trip, however long that might be, you can interact with them. I'm sure there might be instances where they're not responsive, but I don't know that for a fact.
Colin has a book about it. You can read about it. He came to Corvallis last year.
Yeah, there's a lot of documentation.
I guess the reason I ask is just I'm a big law and order person, and so if we would be introducing something that would put someone out of their right mind just by principle, I wouldn't be very supportive of that. That was the reason for my question.
Perhaps the chief has a comment on that.
Do we have the same restrictions in place for places that serve alcohol? It's pretty documented that some people get really aggressive when they drink too much. You know, when we put in all the burden on this one thing, but out there right in front of our face, it's perhaps a similar situation.
To answer your question.
Maybe that's something to talk about.
No, I mean, the state regulates alcohol, LCC reviews that. When they get applications for a new, place that wants to serve alcohol, those come to the city, they get reviewed, there's a review to see, do we know who they are, they a known problem maker, et cetera, et cetera. And so we essentially sign off on and give our approval to OLCC for those names and things that come through there. But short of that, it's all regulated by the state. There aren't citywide regulations for that.
So it's just that this is a new thing. A lot of makes it a name.
Yeah.
I was going to mention that I wish that they had put a medical component in, meaning with a prescription from your psychiatrist or your doctor, you can go do this. Because then I think the insurance companies could be pressured into covering it, and it would be under a more controlled situation. But they didn't, and that's, for me, one of the big deals.
It also makes it a lot more feasible for somebody who has psychiatric problems. They have a doctor now.
Yes.
To your facility.
Yes.
Makes it a whole lot more legitimate. Because then somebody coming in from out of town can't go, hey guys, I have issues, I want to try it.
And you just have to show up. You don't have to have anything.
Also, was there a prospective business that was intended to come in, or this is just legislation, not?
Yeah.
You know, any prospective business that might come in, I mean, there are other forms of how to do, you know, like what you guys are talking about is what they're calling their heroic doses or whatever. The Fetterman, he's another one. Large doses where they have to be administered. And there's other techniques that are, you know, shown in the research with the microdosing levels that don't affect you at all cognitively.
Right.
So it's a shame that those things, you know, that a business couldn't come in with a lower profile that would meet our criteria to be able, for us to be able to afford it, one, two, be able to work in different levels.
So I'll say I've not been approached. Typically that would come through me, through the planning department on a new facility or a new tenant in a current facility. We've not been approached with that over the last few years, but we also, the city did enact a temporary ban like many other cities did back in 2022, right? So 2022, we put that in place, and we're on a long list of cities and counties that put the temporary ban in place through the end of 2024. And that list is long and published well. So we, you know, it would make sense that people haven't approached us because they know there's been a ban in place. But come January 1, that could change, right? Unless this ban is extended for another 2 years while we kind of wait and see. I mean, the way I kind of look at it, not to put my perspective out there too much, but this is kind of, hey, give us 2 more years to kind of look and see how this is affecting other communities. So we're not kind of the guinea pig, and we'll let Albany or Corvallis, whoever, kind of, and 2 years later or a year and a half later, maybe we look at it and we feel a little bit differently. And then when we go out to ask the people to vote on this, we ask the public to vote on it. It's a little bit more informed decision than what it would be or what it would have been. I feel like if we'd have voted on this last election in November, I think what you're hearing from the panel up here is we really don't have a lot more sure data on it today than what we did 2 years ago. So another 2 years, we may be a lot more better informed, and the public might be better informed and be able to make a more informed and educational decision about it. And I would argue that both for people in favor and opposed, right? I mean, if you're in favor of these centers and the use of psilocybin, 2 years from now, you may have a lot more data to back you up, and you're going to have 2 more years of not having incidences with the police, not having incidences, with near parks or schools. And so you may have an even more compelling case 2 years from now than what you may have had with the public last month. On the other side, if you're opposed to it, and the data starts coming out showing that there's issues and problems and overdoses or other issues, then we'll know more. Again, so I just think overall, I don't think an extra 2 years is going to hurt the city of Philomath, and in some ways I think it may allow for a more informed decision about whether to enact a permanent ban or some time, place, manner restrictions, and to allow for psilocybin in the community under those time, place, manner restrictions. So, I don't think we're looking to win or to lose. I think what we're hearing from the elected officials is we are concerned about the public's perception of this, and we want to make sure that we're protecting the public, right? And whatever that protection means, is it just the kids? Is it everybody? Is it overblown because we have alcohol? We have teenagers driving around with cell phones. I mean, there's all kinds of things. If we're really about public safety, there's a lot of things we can do to address public safety outside of manner restrictions to psilocybin centers that aren't even in Philomath.
Everyone is saying like Philomath is gonna be this hotbed of psilocybin. Like, what is the current number of communities that have enacted ban and how many don't? I was under the impression that it was a minority of those that had enacted ban.
Wish I had those numbers. The numbers are out
Like
there.
the majority of Oregon, it's still.
The Oregonian just had a report that came out after this most recent election. And I don't remember the numbers off the top of my head, so I don't want to put numbers out there. But I believe of all of the communities, it was like in the 30, 37 range of the cities or counties that had it on the ballot this last November, earlier this month. And I think all but 2 passed the ban. So there were only 2 where the proposed ban won.
All but one.
All but one. Okay, thank you. All but one passed. What was the total number? Does it have it on there?
17.
17?
Yeah, we're on the ballot. So I should see the total number.
So that's why I didn't want to put a number out there. So the 17 that are out there, all but one passed the ban. And then if it's the same marker, there was a list of those that had the ban in place from 2 years prior that were essentially expiring at the end of the year as well. So, there's 220 something cities in Oregon. So it's a small number that have done an outright ban. A few counties, well, several counties I believe have, which cover a lot of those cities. But
So, just according to this OPB article, in 2022, 25 counties and 26 towns banned psilocybin, and then in 2024, an additional 17 jurisdictions, so a mixture of counties and cities. So, I don't know what that equals in terms of like a majority of the population, because obviously, you could add all 27 counties that banned it together, and that's probably less people than live in Portland, but, yeah.
It's allowed in Corvallis. So.
Yeah.
Looking at the other side of the coin, I think there are, do you have the list of the number of centers?
Centers. This says there's 31 centers all in the state. So, again, when I first started dealing with this 2 years ago, I was concerned that, like the cannabis shops, that they were gonna pop up everywhere. And because of cost of training and cost of product, it's not. And they're saying they're having a real thing of customers.
The centers tend to be in Portland, Eugene. I think there's a few in Bend, but in the major metropolitan areas. And I suspect, based on the economics happening, we'll probably see some consolidation. But if some to attract enough clients, they'll probably.
I was wondering, if in 2 years the community decides that we're gonna allow this here, and we have these time, place, and manner restrictions in place, that we tantamount to abandoning, are you thinking about those restrictions? How that would work if the community decided that we had to have it?
I know, at least for me, and I think something the council has talked about, is that we are very intent on whatever the outcome of that vote is. So we want to make sure we craft the time, place, and manner restrictions in a way where there are places that you could open a center if that's what the voters choose. So I think maybe that would be something we could do, is even have a map of kind of, if these went into place, you know, what would be, because I know that's something that's come up with marijuana, you know, is there's no ban on marijuana in Philomath, there's just very restrictive time, place, and manner restrictions. So I think that's something, I mean, I don't want to speak for everyone, but I know we've all talked about it in council meetings, because we want to give an honest choice to the voters. Do you want it or do you not want it? And that's part of why I'm really curious to get more input on the time, place, and manner restrictions, because psilocybin, that's great. You can vote yes on the ban, but if you vote no on the ban, then we want to make sure we allow it to go forth. So I think that is our intent, at least. We're also not that big of a town.
Banner restrictions can be modified.
Yeah.
I was driving down North 19th recently and noticed that was a pretty industrial place, so that might be an example. I'm not saying it would go in there, but that would be an example that it's far enough away from those child-focused facilities. It's industrial, which would do the manufacturing, and then what is it? Commercial for the facility itself. And that would be a little harder to come by, maybe.
Thoughts about any of the time, place, manner restrictions that we have identified there? They're listed in Ordinance 887 on page 4.
Prime the level, but, oh, go ahead.
Again, they strike me as something like effectively watch us. And on one hand, it doesn't matter, like you say, it would be in the commercial zone anyway, where it ought to be, and if that's allowed, that's fine. I think my concern is that having this it makes it seem very frightening, like you can't have this in your kid. And my hope is that in 2 years, that there will be a complete absence of any sort of anything that would necessitate such strictures. As somebody was already saying, it strikes me that you would want these things around bars more than around psilocybin center. I mean, in terms of paranoia and aggression, I'm not saying that is unheard of, but aggression is not something that is associated with mushrooms of any sort that I have ever heard of. Super not in its wheelhouse. Alcohol, absolutely, but that strikes me as a weird one. So anyway, I am hoping that in time, if those time, place, and manner restrictions seem overly cautious, we might be able to walk them back, if in fact it was in any way an inhibitor. I don't like this. I think there's so much fear around this, and I think so much of this fear is unfounded and unnecessary, that is my desire, is to like, putting the moratorium, that's fine, that probably made sense, it was new, everyone's a little bit freaked out over what all of this was gonna mean. If another 2 years of getting a little more data on it makes people feel better, that's good too. But I am a little bummed out by this. I feel like there's often this almost reefer madness, like hysteria over like, oh my God, what we're bringing into our community, and there are gonna be people running amok, and I mean, I just don't think any of that is going to bear out. And in fact, I think probably what will be happening is that most of these places are gonna go away, because unless they drop their prices, it's not a viable business model. I don't know why they ever thought it would. But, so I think mostly this is going to be a total non-issue. But my last point is just that I'm also a little bit, I feel better about things now after having heard from folks. But my previous concern was that these bans, I feel like, are more of a political statement than they are a practical tool, particularly in the beginning. I feel like if a lot of communities were doing this, not in our town, we don't cotton to that type of thing. And that bothers me, because I don't believe that this town has that sort of unified ideology around it. There may be some places in Oregon where you could safely say, this town does not want anything like that. And that may be the case. Paloma, and I think we're the better for it, is not that town. There is a very wide range of opinions about these kinds of things. And so for that reason, I was unhappy with this notion that the council was gonna be like, not here. Like I say, at this point, I'm like, fine, whatever. But those are my concerns.
Keep up.
Okay.
Just on the time, place, manner restrictions, I think if cost is an issue, allowing facilities in the residence would reduce the cost. If you have to open a commercial establishment in order to do this, but you can have a massage office in your home, right? And treat people. And, you know, maybe you get somebody who's on an FSRI and having a bad reaction in your massage office, you know, you call for help or do whatever you do. But I think if cost is a concern, we should look at whatever zoning or business issues there are of operating business out of your home, because there are therapists that work out of their home. And some of them may be working with people who are on prescribed drugs, and some of those prescribed drugs result in violent reactions, and they're not restricted from practicing in their home. So, you know, and I live on very little money, and I've done that for all my life, so cost is definitely an issue. So I think more people should be able to earn a living from their home.
Councilor Crocker?
I was just going to say, when we first did this 2 years ago, we thought we would have a clear vision of what it looked like, and we don't, because there's not almost any data about what's going on. So I'm hoping that in 2 years we will have a better vision, but
I just wanted to ask a follow-up question of Gianna. The only specific time, place, and manner was that number 5 under the location ones, just with your comments about, I don't remember the words you exactly used, but not being comfortable or disappointed or whatever it was with kind of overly restrictive. Is it specifically just that one about libraries or parks, or are there other changes you see?
No, like I said, I don't really see these as, I don't see this as a threat to children. I don't see psilocybin centers as a threat to children, so.
So it's just that one line that you have? What would your ideal time, place, and manner restrictions look like, do you think?
I'd have to think about that. I don't know. I definitely think that parks and libraries are probably fine. I guess it's the whole kit and caboodle. I mean, bars do have certain things, right? You can't have a bar next to a school, right?
I don't know what all the state regulations are.
It's just not up to us as much as the state on that one, so we don't know. But,
I mean, I tried Googling it and couldn't find it, so
Okay.
I don't know.
I believe that is governed by ORS 339.020, which is referenced in the within 1,000 feet of an elementary school or secondary school for which attendance of compulsory. That's the ORS that's written, and I believe in our last council meeting, that's what our legal counsel brought up as well, was that there were some state laws and restrictions around the location of where these centers would be able to operate.
Yeah, I don't have any specifics. It's just, it contributes to a notion with this is, if people undergoing this therapy are somehow a threat to children, and I don't see any reason for that.
okay.
I think some of the, just to add conversation, some of the state statute around these, in this 339 statute on the distance from the school children, didn't talk so much as it being a threat to children, but it talked about the promotion and advertising material that would be there for signage, that the children wouldn't be exposed to that if it wasn't like directly next to a school or a park or, one of these facilities. And so it was less about a physical threat to the children and more about exposure to the industry. So it talked about signage and it talked about frontages and that sort of bit, and being distanced away from schools. These first three, if you're looking, those first three come from the statute. Number 4, number 5 were developed by the council or by the city attorney and staff. So 4 and 5 were kind of in addition to state, but the first two are very specific in the state statute. And if you go back and look at the state statute, it is a little bit more about exposure to it than it is about protection from it, if that.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense.
You better block their Instagram account.
Yeah. I'm sure if they could, they would have included that language in there.
And a standard city block, is that about 400 feet? So 1,000 feet is like 2.5 blocks, I think.
Yeah, one town's gonna be 4, yeah, so.
Brad, you done with this conversation?
Made somebody else.
You done with this conversation?
Thanks for being here.
So I will note that the 339020 is duty to send children to school. So I guess that would be, and then 339030 1A has to do with exemptions from compulsory school attendance. At least from what I can find.
Yeah, sorry, so it would have been back in the
Right.
ORSs that were adopted, so like the 4, sorry, I referenced that, so it's the 475. So it's the new language that came in with the psilocybin controls and mandates, so it's in the 457A 530 range.
Okay,
But again, I've not memorized the statute, so I just
thank you.
read through them.
Has this been helpful?
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Has it been helpful to you?
Yeah. Yeah, it's good to hear from you all, and yeah, hear what you have to think and say.
Yeah, I like the idea of being able to be a little selective of what you want Like, is this good or is it bad? Like, is it really bad or not? But is it something that, like, there's a lot of things in the community that would great that we could bring, and I just don't know that that is one of those things that's like, yes, this is what would make this community. I don't know. I really love people on with them.
If you want to start a grocery store,
It was outside of town.
it's not outside of our jurisdiction.
How far towards state line.
One foot.
City limits goes to the Boulevard Apartments on the east side. Then it goes just short of where Applegate and Main Street come together on the west side.
Like
So-
the clinic, kind of.
Yeah, just on the other side of the clinic. So Clinic and Boulevard Apartments is like the edges east and west of city limits. Of course, the Philomath community is much larger than that, but Philomath city limits is their east and west.
Outside of city limits.
Then it's,
County issue.
County.
yeah.
So, and some, like we read, some counties have done bans, other counties, the majority of counties have not done countywide bans, so. Yeah, then they would just go through the county for the land use approval process and through the state for their just regular licensing.
Someone could open one in Chenard's. It's kind of close.
Yes.
Bart next to the phone.
There's truly one in Corvallis that's not that far away if you're really wanting. And, then-
Kind of one.
Depending on ability.
pardon me?
True, we do have a bus, yeah.
Yeah, we've got a free bus, but I mean, at the cost of the treatment.
Yeah.
That's not good for those issues, the transportation.
There's a map, by the way, over there of city limits and what the current plan for zoning is, in case you want to take a look. But we are currently updating it.
Yeah. Any further thoughts, questions from the community?
Brent, you look like you're about to say something.
Oh, no, not really. Maybe I was gonna say, I'm just thinking the openness and rational conversation, so this is another great thing about the full open. Very nice.
Amen.
Anything from council? Chris?
No, good. Thank everybody for coming. Appreciate it. And thank you, city council members, for coming. Appreciate Chief Grisky coming, taking time out of his evening to be here. I think that this has been great. So thank you all.
Thank you. Have a good night.